This is the kind of secret that doesn't whisper, it screams. Because if even half of what's being alleged is true, then everything the world thought it knew about this royal fairy tale may have been carefully staged, emotionally weaponized, and polished for applause. Let's not pretend this is just another rumor drifting through the palace corridors. This story cuts deeper. It claws at timelines, memories, and motherhood itself. And once you hear how the pieces line up, or more accurately, how they don't, you'll understand why people are saying this isn't gossip anymore. It's a reckoning. It all detonated the moment Tom Bower's name re-entered the conversation. Not with a soft tease, not with a polite hint, but with an expose that landed like a cracked mirror held up to the Sussex narrative. Suddenly, the questions people were once mocked for asking were no longer fringe. They were front and center. And at the heart of it all sat one name, spoken in hushed tones but loaded with explosive weight: Lilibet. For years, the public was told to stop asking, stop doubting, stop connecting dots. But dots have a way of connecting themselves when stories keep changing shape. It starts with grief, the kind of grief no one dares to question. A miscarriage story delivered with cinematic intensity, lockdown silence, hospital corridors, and a grieving couple leaving with what they described as the remains of an unborn child cradled in their arms. A private burial, a sacred tree, bare hands digging into the earth. It was poetic, haunting, and devastating. Too devastating, some would later say, because when medical professionals quietly examined the details, the cracks began to show. Hospitals don't release fetal remains like that. Not during strict global lockdowns. Not without legal documentation. Not for backyard burials under trees that inconveniently don't grow where the couple claimed to be living. Partners weren't even allowed into emergency wings at the time, yet the story insisted otherwise. Still, people stayed silent. Who wants to challenge a story wrapped in loss? But then the numbers spoke up. The miscarriage was said to have happened in July 2020. Less than a year later, a healthy, full-term baby was announced. Women around the world, mothers, nurses, doctors, started doing the math in their heads. Quietly at first. Then louder. Recovery time. Healing. The physical reality of pregnancy. Month by month, the timeline didn't bend. It broke. And while all this was supposedly happening, there were images of daily lifting, constant movement, and physical ease that didn't match late pregnancy or recent trauma. No explanation followed, just a clean pivot to the next chapter, as if the previous one had been erased with a swipe. That's when unease turned into disbelief. Because when the miscarriage story was published, many women didn't feel comforted. They felt disturbed. Women who had lived through real loss recognized something that didn't sit right. The silence of miscarriage, the medical coldness, the shock that leaves you numb, not narrating poetic moments in real time. Some describe the account as performative. Others said it injected blame into a space that should never carry it, especially when stress and media pressure were publicly accused as causes. Doctors pushed back quietly, but firmly. Miscarriages don't work like that. Biology doesn't follow headlines, and grief doesn't need a villain. But the pattern was forming, because this wasn't the first time questions had followed a pregnancy announcement. Years earlier, whispers from Meghan's own past had surfaced. Whispers people were told to ignore. Friends from before the palace, before the spotlight, stepping forward with claims that felt dangerous to repeat. Fertility struggles. Talk of frozen eggs. Mentions of endometriosis. Even allegations of serious surgeries that would complicate or prevent natural pregnancy altogether. No confirmations, no denials, just silence. And silence in a story like this is deafening. Then came the royal tour, Australia 2018, the moment insiders say the atmosphere changed completely. What was meant to be a triumphant debut allegedly turned tense, chaotic, and emotionally volatile. Staff murmured about sudden announcements, unapproved decisions, and a spotlight that shifted too sharply, too fast. Behind closed doors, according to multiple accounts, something explosive happened. A private argument, raised voices, and a question so chilling it still echoes years later. Are you really pregnant? Think about that. A question like that doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from doubt, from inconsistency, from seeing something that doesn't align with what you're being told. Observers noted the visible strain. The forced smiles, the disconnect. Something was unraveling even as the public was being asked to clap. And just when the world thought the story couldn't twist any further, it took a darker turn. one that jolted even the most skeptical observers upright. A woman from Costa Rica stepped forward publicly, not anonymously, by name, by face, by voice. She claimed her child was allegedly used as a stand-in for Lilibet during a visit. She claimed she was promised payment. She claimed the child photographed was hers, and she claimed she was never paid. Suddenly, photos were re-examined, facial features compared, timelines questioned again, and then there was the detail that refused to go away, reports that no children were seen traveling with the couple at all. Add to that an alleged unpaid hotel bill, an early departure, and a silence that followed louder than any denial could have been. Then came the screenshots. Royal birth announcements appearing and disappearing. One version naming a surrogate. Another version altered, locations changed, sources blurred. No official explanation, no correction, just confusion layered over confusion. Each detail alone could be brushed off. A mistake, a misunderstanding, a coincidence. But stacked together, they formed a shadow too large to ignore. And that shadow stretches directly over the question everyone is now afraid to ask out loud but can no longer stop thinking about. Who is Lilibet, really? Because when miscarriage stories defy medicine, pregnancy timelines defy biology, friends describe medical limitations, a husband allegedly voices doubt, children appear and vanish from public view, and official announcements shift without explanation, the issue is no longer curiosity, it's credibility. Tom Bauer didn't invent this mystery. He didn't need to. He simply turned on the light. And once the light is on, there's no one seeing what's standing in the room. This is where the story pauses, not because the truth is finished, but because it's just beginning to breathe. Because once you step past the shock, once the noise fades, one truth remains brutally clear: this story refuses to stay buried. Every time the public tried to move on, another detail clawed its way back into view. Another photograph, another timeline slip, another voice saying, "Wait, that's not how this works." And suddenly, the question wasn't, why are people talking about this? It was, why were they told not to? What makes this so unsettling isn't a single accusation. It's the pattern, the choreography, the way every revelation seems to arrive just after the audience is emotionally disarmed. Loss, healing, hope, then silence. Then a perfectly framed image that demands belief without scrutiny. But belief, once cracked, doesn't repair easily. People began revisiting moments they once brushed aside. The baby bump that appeared firm one day and oddly mobile the next. The way it seemed to shift, fold, or change shape between appearances. Women who had been pregnant before didn't laugh anymore. They stared, they zoomed in, they compared. And quietly, privately, many said the same thing. Something feels wrong. Still, no one wanted to say it out loud. Because questioning motherhood is taboo, questioning grief is radioactive, and questioning a child's existence? That's the kind of thing that gets you labeled cruel before you're even heard. But what happens when the questions refuse to die? That's when attention turned to the children themselves, or more precisely, their absence. For figures who built a brand on visibility, advocacy, and storytelling, the children were almost myth-like. Rare appearances, carefully controlled images, blurred faces, distance, always distance. And yet, paradoxically, their names were used often. Their stories referenced, their existence invoked in speeches, lawsuits, and emotional appeals. Present when useful, invisible when inconvenient. That contradiction gnawed at people. Then came the whispers from insiders. Not tabloids chasing clicks, but staff, acquaintances, locals, people who noticed oddities because they were physically there. No strollers, no nannies, no signs of children during extended stays. Questions asked quietly and answered vaguely, and each time the explanation changed. Privacy, security, normalcy, protection. But protection from what, exactly? Because protection doesn't require rewriting reality. It doesn't require altering official announcements. It doesn't require stand-ins, confusion, or unanswered claims from people willing to attach their real names to uncomfortable accusations. The story about the alleged stand-in child refused to fade for one reason alone. It came with risk. No one steps forward publicly with a claim like that unless they believe something went very wrong. The mother didn't sound triumphant. She sounded angry. Hurt, unpaid, dismissed. And once that door opened, others began peeking through. Why were there no hospital confirmations? Why no consistent doctor references? Why did details only emerge through personal essays and controlled interviews, never through verifiable records? Why did so many explanations rely on emotion rather than evidence? Emotion can be powerful, but it can also be strategic. At this point, defenders insisted the world was being cruel. That curiosity had crossed into obsession, that people should leave the children alone. And that sentiment landed, because no one wants to harm a child. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Asking where the children are and asking who they are is not the same as attacking them. It's questioning the adults. And adults in positions of influence don't get immunity from scrutiny just because they invoke vulnerability. That's where Tom Bower's role becomes critical, because his work didn't rely on viral clips or social media outrage. It followed money trails, witness accounts, contradictions, and documented shifts in narrative. He didn't shout, he stacked facts. And the stack grew tall enough to cast a shadow over everything beneath it. The most chilling realization for many wasn't any single claim, it was the possibility that the truth, whatever it is, has been managed with surgical precision. That if there is something being hidden, it's not chaos driving it. It's control. Control over images, over timing, over access, over sympathy, and control over silence. Because silence can be just as engineered as a headline. People began asking what happens if the story eventually collapses. Not in scandal, but in legal reality. Succession lines, titles, public trust, contracts, charities, media deals built on personal truth narratives. What happens if the foundation shifts? That's when the panic isn't emotional anymore. It's structural, and that may explain the aggressive shutdowns, the lawsuits, the warnings, the refusal to clarify even the simplest inconsistencies. When a story is airtight, clarification strengthens it. When it's fragile, clarification is dangerous. So the story keeps floating, suspended between outrage and disbelief. And somewhere in the middle sits a little girl whose name has become heavier than anyone ever intended. Lilibet. A name loaded with legacy, history, sentiment, a name chosen to anchor belief. Because who would doubt something wrapped in that much symbolism? But symbolism isn't proof, and legacy doesn't override reality. That's why this story refuses to end, because if everything is exactly as presented, then transparency would end the speculation overnight. One clear answer, one consistent record, one grounded explanation. But instead, there's movement, shifting ground, new versions replacing old ones, and a sense that the truth is always one step ahead of public reach. People aren't asking for spectacle anymore, they're asking for clarity. Because clarity is the only thing that can separate cruelty from concern. And until it arrives, the questions will keep circling. Quietly, relentlessly, uncomfortably. This isn't about tearing down a child. It's about understanding a story that may have been built too fast, too carefully, and too emotionally to withstand honest light. If there's nothing to hide, the truth will stand. But if there is, then this won't be the last chapter. It'll be the moment everyone looks back on and says, this is where we should have paid attention. And the silence that follows, that's not peace, that's pressure. And pressure always finds a way out.